Hi, my name is Kyla Stewart and my project is called The Gifted Myth. I first began delving into the complexities of giftedness and the gifted program itself last year in AP seminar. I first came up with the idea because in elementary school I was not identified as gifted, though most of my friends were. I was tested 3 times and was in on all advanced classes, but I still didn't get in. So last year I decided to conduct my project on why I didn't get in and whether it would have benefited me if I had. I learned a lot, but I wasn't able to come into any real conclusions because it was all secondary research. So this year I decided to further my project and take the opportunity to see if the current gifted system in County X is effective in identifying and enriching truly gifted students. So I would like to preface all of this by stating that giftedness is a very controversial topic. This is regarding the definition, how children should be educated, how they should be tested, and whether it's even real. This all comes into fruition in a book called Conceptions of Giftedness, which was edited by Janet Davidson and Robert Sternberg. I state that they're editors because there are many authors who contributed to this book. All of the authors were professionals in the fields of child development, education theory, and gifted theory. They were all asked the same question: what is your opinion on giftedness, and where do you think giftedness should go in the future? So this book creates a good summary and a spectrum of professional opinions, ranging from every single child is gifted and they all deserve a personalized curriculum, to giftedness is not real and it was created for funding. Throughout this whole spectrum, though, no professional takes into account student opinions, and this is where my niche comes in. I decided to fill the gap of kids who are actually in these programs not being asked how they feel about it, not being asked their opinions, and seeing how things are actually affected. So, to the definition of giftedness. There really is no definition. According to the National Society for the Gifted and Talented, which is a national organization and resource platform for gifted students, teachers, and parents alike, they state that gifted children are children and youth with outstanding talent who perform or show potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to others their age. They state in the next line that this is a very vague and broad definition, and I couldn't agree more. By stating that levels of accomplishment, doesn't state whether that means intellectually, logically, or in the arts. So basically the intention of that definition is to have each school, district, and state come up with their own standard of giftedness. And this leads right into gifted testing. So in a CNN editorial by Karen Coyle, who is an educator and an education theorist, she states that giftedness is difficult to measure, and this is why schools and school districts try so many different ways to identify gifted students. This is supported by Hoagie's Gifted Education, which is an award-winning resource platform. They state that 500 different tests are available to test for giftedness and being used in different schools throughout the United States. 500. And these range from the KBIT-2, which is a brief test that takes 20 to 30 minutes, to the Wechsler assessment test, which takes several days to complete. So you see where the disparity is. These vary greatly, but they're all putting children into the same sort of program. And when there's no universal test, there's no universal standard, which kind of ruins the credibility of giftedness, where it's non-transferable. If I'm gifted at one school and tested one way, and I go to a different school and they don't test the same way, I'm no longer gifted. So, to clarify, this project is researching the validity of the gifted program in this county, not necessarily the validity of giftedness in general. But in this literature review, the validity of giftedness is being called into question greatly in recent years. A big part of this is the phenomenon of parents thinking that every child is gifted. This is not to state that not every child is unique, but uniqueness does not equal giftedness. One may have seen on Facebook or Pinterest a post such as this saying that every child is gifted, they just unwrap their presents at different times. Of course, every child is talented in their own way. However, it's kind of difficult to prove them wrong, considering the definition of giftedness is at a higher level of achievement than people of their age. Your child could be gifted in a certain topic, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're gifted, but there's no way to prove them wrong. The biggest thing that is undermining giftedness right now is tutoring to pass. In recent years, organizations have sprung up which tutor children to pass the gifted test if you are willing to pay. And this is detrimental to the gifted program, because giftedness is supposed to be an inherent talent and an advancement where you need to be educated specially. But this is basically stating any child can be gifted. Bright Kids New York City is a tutoring program like this, and in In an interview with DNA Info, which is a local New York newspaper, they state that it's no different from studying for the SAT. They need to be taught the underlying skills. So this calls into question the validity of the gifted test, saying that it's just a bunch of skills that kids can learn. So basically anybody can be gifted in those standards. So into my methods. I decided to take a qualitative and a quantitative route when collecting my data, the qualitative being my survey answers and my anecdotal evidence, both of which were collected through the survey. However, I see them as separate things. And quantitative being the GPAs that were given to me by schools, as well as all of the numbers and data that was given to me through the survey. I would say that my experiment is quasi-experimental because it's not entirely random, though I was asking questions to population and affecting them. That is the limitation of my project. I would like for it to be entirely random, but I don't have the resources to pull random schools and random students from those schools. So ideally, that would be the way that it would be. I chose the survey and GPAs because I felt like it gave a diverse amount of data. It gave student opinions, which was the biggest emphasis, but opinions can vary greatly. So I wanted to back it up with hard data in the form of GPAs. For my survey, I had 161 responses from 3 different schools. The schools would be now regarded as schools A, B, and C to protect the anonymity of the schools. I chose these schools because they have a full, partial, and no gifted program. School A offers 0 gifted classes, not meaning that they don't have gifted students there, they just don't educate them specially. School C has a partial gifted program, offering them freshman and sophomore year, but not junior and senior. And School B has a full gifted program, offering it all 4 years. So it would be a standard honors gifted AP scale. So my survey split children into the gifted and non-gifted groups. They were asked the question, were you tested for gifted? Then, were you admitted to gifted? And then based off of the yes or no from that, it would split them into 2 different surveys. They were asked the similar questions, but slightly different because they were in different groups. So the different types of questions that were on my survey, I used Likert scales on a 1 to 5 basis, but I also used Likert scales and a word basis, ranging from very harmful to very beneficial, to add variance in the project. And additionally, I asked multiple choice questions, yes and no questions, and then there was also a free response area where students could leave comments about their personal opinions and elaborate more on their beliefs. The survey was distributed through Google Forms, which expedited the process and made it easy for students to access it through mobile phones and through computers. Hard copies were available if asked for, however. I collected GPAs from the same 3 schools. I initially wanted to do countywide data, but that proved to be too difficult. So I obtained my GPAs through administration at the 3 different schools. This was a very trying task and very difficult, but thankfully I was able to get all of my data. That is another limitation, the time constraints that were given. It was difficult to reach administrators at schools that I didn't attend. A limitation, additionally, is that I only received gifted GPAs from School C. I was ideally hoping to get gifted and non-gifted GPAs of all of the students at each school. These would, of course, be anonymous GPAs. There's no student indicators, no IDs, no birthdays, no class ranks. However, School C declined to give me their non-gifted GPAs. I don't know why. This is just what they proved to do. With analysis, I used comparative statistics. I used percentages and compared them basis of non-gifted versus gifted, school versus school, meaning high school versus high school, and elementary school versus elementary school, which I will later get into. On an ethics note, everything was anonymous. There was no student identifiers. On the survey, there was a disclaimer stating that everything was anonymous. Students never had to give their names. And if they felt uncomfortable answering any of the questions, they did not have to. No child was forced. In addition, parent permission forms in the form of implied consent, meaning that a parent would have to sign and return the form before a child would be exempt, were distributed. However, even if a child didn't return that, they were not forced to take the survey. So moving into the meat of it. I split this into identification and enrichment on a basis of effectiveness, as you can see in my question. For identification, by effective I mean representative enrollment, meaning by gender and race, and generally reasonable proportion of those tested versus admitted. So I will be discussing the total gifted rate mostly here. So there, I took the proportion of those tested, I took the proportion of those tested who were admitted, and then the total gifted rate is the amount of children that were in gifted who responded that they were from a certain elementary school. And this is the data for the 4 elementary schools that I chose. I felt as though that it would be representative to choose the top 4 schools for the 3 high schools that I asked. So I wouldn't have one dominating over the other, so I'd have an even population. So with School 1, they had a 33.3% total gifted rate. School 2 was a 60% total. School 3 was 56% total. And School 4 was 12.5% total. So to analyze these numbers, I took into account the socioeconomic level of the schools and the surrounding area. School 2 had the lowest income rate and the highest total gifted rate. I assume that this is because the school gets lower funding, and schools get funding for their gifted programs. So they pushed more students to being gifted to up their funding, which they don't necessarily have to use on the gifted program. And School 3 had the highest income rate and the second highest gifted rate. I assume that this is because it has been proven in many different studies that higher income parents tend to know more about school programs, and they will be more willing to ask for their students to be tested, increasing the gifted rates. In terms of gender, the County X that I am analyzing has about even proportions of males and females. There is about 49.2% female, 50.8% male. So one would assume that the total gifted rates of males and females would be about even, ideally. However, females had a total gifted rate of 43.4 and males had a total gifted rate of 69.6. So this is over a 20% difference. The same goes for racial distribution. In County X, white students and Hispanic students are the majority, and the second most are Black students and Asian students. So I chose the top 4 to get a representative sample. So white students had a 56.4% gifted rate, Hispanics had a 57.1% gifted rate, Black students 14.2, and Asian students 27.2. So clearly the majority were in a vast majority here. And this is a big problem because according to Florida Administrative Code, there are 2 ways to test for giftedness. 1 is a general eligibility requirement, and 2 is special requirements for underrepresented students or those with a low socioeconomic background. So Florida has programs put in place so low socioeconomic backgrounds and minorities can get higher representation in the gifted programs. Clearly this is not working. So into the terms of enrichment. This is having to do with the GPA scales that I acquired. This is on a 5.0 weighted scale, and it is the most recent available. So this is limited once again because School C only gave me gifted GPAs. So in order to include all of the schools, I discussed average gifted GPAs at each school. School A had a 3.46, School B 3.97, and School C was 3.42. So despite School A having no gifted program, they scored higher, if not slightly so, than School C, who has a partial gifted program. This brings up a possible reason why gifted students aren't being educated to the proper standard, because gifted students here who have 0 gifted specific education are performing just as highly as those who do have gifted specific education in high school. At this point, School C is no longer included. We're just going to move to School A and School B. This was taken because I decided that School B has a much higher GPA average than School A. Don't know why this is, just in general, gifted and non-gifted, they are much higher. So I decided to take the difference between the gifted and non-gifted students and their GPAs to see if gifted students were truly performing at a much higher level than the non-gifted students. School A, the difference was 1.35 GPA points, and School B was 0.47. So this kind of proves that School B is not performing and educating their gifted students especially at a high enough caliber, because students who are receiving 0 extra gifted assessments and extra assistance are performing higher than the non-gifted students at that school. So getting into survey responses, this is a Likert scale question that I asked. And the question was, what effect has your enrollment in the gifted system had on your academics during your enrollment? So this is not applicable to students who are still in the gifted program. So this was a mostly neutral to positive range. 70% of the responses were from 3 to 5 range, so neutral positive. And the same goes for this question, where I asked, what effect did your involvement in the gifted system have on your academics after you ceased to be educated as gifted? So this is also, once again, for students who are no longer educated as gifted, seeing if it affected their further education. This is still in the neutral to positive range, but the 5s, which is a large benefit, dropped significantly, and 3s, which is neutral, increased. This is supported by GPAs of gifted students being higher than non-gifted students, but not significantly so. And I believe that this is because no amount of education is going to harm a child. Nobody is going to say that, yes, me being educated made it harder for me. I also asked the main question of my paper: do you believe the gifted system is effective in identifying and enriching gifted students? This is still in the neutral range, which you can see grew expansively. Once again, this is in the neutral positive range, which is probably because they don't feel like they want to criticize the gifted program because they were involved in it. A big issue with giftedness is whether or not it harbors social development, considering the fact that most gifted classes are isolated from the rest of the students. So, I asked students, what effect do you think that the gifted system had on your social development? This is far more neutral, seeing that 3 is the biggest scale, that being in the middle of the 1 to 5. I feel as though this was a difficult question for me to ask, and that I probably should have worded it in a different way, because it's difficult for students to analyze their own social development, as they don't know how life would have been otherwise, because this is all that they have ever known. I also asked for free responses, and this is where students could talk about their opinions and how they felt about the gifted program. I had a varying range of gifted students saying different things about the program. Some stated that they were being judged for being smarter, some saying that it was a fake program and they benefited none, some saying that it had no future application. 2 people even said that it harbored mental illness, saying that they felt isolated and that they were never good enough, and some said that it isolated them. However, on the other side of the spectrum, some said that it created a tight-knit group of friends, which created a good support system of peers, and then some said that they would have been bored and disruptive if they had not been in the gifted program. So I feel as though the gifted program's success has to do with the school that runs it. Of course, that is very variable, as we have discussed. It changes from school to school. And additionally, there were many more negative comments than there were positive comments. Not to say that the gifted system is more negative than positive, because people are more likely to remember negative experiences and comment on those than they are positive experiences. And once again, gifted students are unlikely to criticize the gifted system that they were involved in because they feel like they're demeaning themselves by saying that the gifted system isn't good, so therefore I'm not as good as I thought. Moving into conclusions. Clearly, gender and racial distribution is not equal as it should be. Socioeconomic level of schools is influential on their gifted enrollment, where it should not be. And high school gifted programs don't benefit students to the level as they should. Gifted students with gifted programs should be accelerating and performing at much higher levels than they are currently. Getting into solutions. The biggest thing that needs to happen first is national level standards. This means a universal test and a universal definition. This means that education theorists, teachers, parents, students all need to come together and decide on a standard, which means giftedness. That means a number that students are identified as. If they take an aptitude test and reach that number, that means that they are gifted. And we have a standard test for that. This doesn't change from school to school, from state to state. This would ideally be modeled off of Kurt Heller's Munich model. He is an education theorist who in Germany with his colleagues came up with a model for giftedness. In his model, there are 8 different spheres of giftedness where children take aptitude tests in each sphere. And based on a cumulative score, if you reach a certain level, you are gifted. And then you are given a personalized curriculum based off of where you fall in the different spheres. So this can benefit students who are gifted in the arts, whereas we don't accommodate that here. And it would benefit students all around and give them a personalized curriculum. However, due to manpower and funding, this is probably a bit much. We're not able to provide that for students, but that doesn't mean that we can't provide a standard of greatness for the gifted program, which enriches students at an equal level all around. Additionally, students should never be considered over funding. Funding should never be considered over students. Socioeconomic level should have no influence on the gifted rates of a school. That means that gifted funding needs to be universal, regardless of your admission. Additionally, racial and gender equality needs to be ensured. Not that people of female or people of different races should be granted easier admission, that they should just be sought after more and brought in for testing more and made it more known that this is available to them. And these are my references.
Thank you very much, Kyla.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have 2 questions for you. So my first one was, what was the most influential and or important source that really guided the train of your research?
Do you mean like?
From your literature,
Oh, okay.
How it guided your process.
Well, really, last year I came across Kurt Heller's Munich model, and I really feel like that is what I based my project off of, because last year I found out that it possibly wasn't performing at other places, and not necessarily County X, but at other places at the caliber that it should. So I saw the Munich model and thought, this is fantastic, this is what everything should be modeled after. And then I wanted to see how well this county did in relation to the Munich model.
Thank you. And then my second one is a little bit more specific. It goes into your statistics on the identification of gifted students. I just wanted to clarify, was that from the self-reporting, or like where like the percentage of those students who are identified as gifted, was that self-reporting, or was that data that you received from the county?
That was self-reporting through the survey.
So since this was a question that you kind of have been pondering since AP seminar, now that you've researched it to this depth, do you have additional questions that have emerged?
Yes, I would love to delve more into the research in different states and different counties to see if this is a universal issue that is going on in the United States. And I was talking to my dad about it the other day, and talking about whether or not other countries have gifted programs and how their gifted systems work, and in comparison to the United States. I think that would be a really interesting thing to look into.
And thank you. Additionally, what would be some advice that you would give a student who is going to do research similar to yours on a similar topic?
I would say don't get too hard set in what you're going to achieve. Be flexible and don't get bogged down in things not going your way, because I had a very difficult time getting the GPA. I first went to the county and that didn't work, so then I went to administrators and many didn't get back to me, and trying to give the survey was difficult because teachers didn't respond. Just don't be focused on that. Know that it's going to go forward and you're going to be okay, because the way that this is all structured, even if your project kind of fails, they set you up so you can still have a project off of it and you can still criticize yourself and make good findings.
Thank you.
In which specific part of your research process was your consultant most helpful, and how was he or she most helpful? What did you learn from the consultant about your field of research?
My consultant, his name was Larry Fairman, and he was a friend of my dad's from college. He now works on the school board in Jacksonville, and he has done a lot of research on the gifted program there. His students attend a private school and they don't have a gifted program there, so we thought that that was always very interesting, so he conducted his own research there. So he gave me a lot of background about what the gifted program is and how it works in different schools, and that he brought up the fact to me that it's not a universal thing. There's no universal tests, there are no universal standards. So he led me in this direction of wondering whether or not, without universal standards, gifted programs are still working at the same caliber.
And I'm going to ask one more question
Of
that's
course.
not on this sheet of paper that they gave me. I think you started your presentation with the fact that you were either tested in elementary school for gifted and you weren't put in the program. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
So now that you've done all of this research and listening to your results, I would like to know personally now, and I don't know if this is off the record or not, but
Excuse me.
do you feel that your education has worked out fine without being in a gifted program? Because some of the facts that you gave us, and with my background in education, what I know about teaching and gifted students, how do you feel now?
I feel like I've been fine without gifted, mostly because I've had really great teachers which has helped me along the way. And in high school they offer the honors AP option, so I feel like you're getting the same sort of level of education. Really, that, you bringing that up, that is another reason that I thought of this topic, because I was talking to people about like whether they were gifted or not. And a lot of the people in the top 10 of our school were not identified as gifted, if not most of them. So I thought that was interesting that non-gifted kids ended up doing just as well, if not better, than those who were not gifted.
And one more question. Your surveys, if I saw this correctly, were mostly with students. Were there any surveys or opinions given by non-gifted teachers and gifted teachers?
No, that would be something that I would be really interested in finding out, the idea, like whether or not teachers have an opinion on this, and which I'm sure they do. But no, that fell out of the range of my research since I was basing it off of student opinions.
And after your research, do you think it might make a difference who the teacher is and how those children improved or progressed and what curriculum was used?
Oh, of course. I think that every child's success is based off of their teachers. Teachers are a very important part of the education system. And the different curriculums, each school is able to come up with what they think gifted students should learn. So I definitely believe that that is influential. Thank you.
Thank you.